fear of making mistakes can stifle creativity more than anything else. True creativity involves experimentation and curiosity. It has been a long journey for me of fighting perfectionism. I have moved from realistic art to an intuitive mindset when creating. I no longer pre-plan ahead and only use my immediate feelings to guide me. Nothing is a mistake. In fact, what I first see as a mistake, or when I have the urge to throw it in the trash, I soldier on and I just keep going. Most of the time, I am happy with what has happened within the painting and the outcome. Like happy accidents. I find using a sketchbook has helped me with this mindset. Daily painting happens within my sketchbook, and I can use what I create there to inspire larger paintings. Today, I'd like to share from start to finish on how I create an intuitive painting in my sketchbook with watercolors and ink. Anyone can do this, even if you have never touched watercolor before. So let's go. First thing, I wet the paper using a hockey 2-inch brush. Make it really wet, but not puddles. If it dries while you're painting, that is okay. We can go back over it with water if needed. Remember, there are no mistakes. Just keep going. Great things can happen with watercolor using both wet and dry techniques, so don't worry about what happens with your paint. There is a piece of paper between the page that I'm working on and the page below it. I do this because it is a sketchbook and it preserves the pages below. So I mix up my watercolor into puddles on a palette. Here I am using Art Philosophy Currents palette. The colors I am using are algae, jellyfish, seaside, deep blue, bluefin, and blue whale. They're all in the Currents palette. The idea here is to put the paint on the paper. I do it in stripes, but you can do it any way you'd like. The goal for me here was to get some of the paint to bleed into each other to create interesting effects of color and some areas to be sharp. It will look messy and it won't look quite right, but this is the ugly stage where I doubt myself. I just keep going. These paint marks will create really interesting backdrop to the ink work we will do later. Put the paint on intuitively. There is no right or wrong way. So I pick lots of different colors from the palette. Sometimes I mix them to create blends of the colors in different shades and hues. You can just watch along. You can do your own thing. I'll add dots and line work. I try to let big blobs of paint bleed into other big blobs of paint. You'll see what I mean here. It's getting a little dry, so I just am going with that, and I'm drawing and painting with my brush sharper lines. Some dark areas, some lighter areas. Let the colors bleed, let the colors drip. The trick is to just keep going. Back in to add a little more light areas. I also like to leave some white of the paper. They can be really interesting, those white spots later. You can also take drips of puddles of water from your water can and just drip it onto the paint that you've done. It will make these really pretty blooms of paint, and that can be really interesting. Here I'm going over other areas to let the paint bleed a little more into the other colors and to mix and mingle. That's kind of the idea of what you want to do here. This technique is everything against what traditional watercolor artists like to do, what they tell you to do, what all the rules are. Blooms are a bad thing in traditional watercolor for some reason. I personally like those blooms. I like what they do. I like what I can do with them later. I think they're so interesting and they give your painting so much character. I'm not saying that in a normal watercolor place that maybe the blooms are not appropriate, I like the blooms. Now I let the paint dry. The whole paper has to be really dry. You can use a hairdryer for this, or you can just let it go and let nature do its course. That's usually what I do. I usually walk away from it. It does more interesting things when I don't take a hairdryer to it. So I came back in. Now I'm just making shapes. I do have an idea of what I want. I'm looking to do an underwater scene. Using the same watercolor that I use, same palette, just going in with different ideas and shapes. You can follow along if you'd like to try this on your own. You can use the shapes I'm doing. You can create your own. The watercolor underneath will not bleed. It will stay with what it is. It will stay what you've painted. So this is the second layer over top. It will not mix with the colors underneath, which creates even more interesting effects. I'm adding some darker blue here from my palette. Kind of mixed a few of the darker blues so it has like some shading to it, has some variance. I took the greener blue that I mixed from the colors from this palette, and I'm just drawing some wavy lines, going over it in spots to make some blooms and some thicker and darker and lighter areas. I used an angle brush here. All the supplies will be down in the comments, in the description, so you can, if you want to know exactly what I'm using, all the information will be down there. This is what I'm getting out now is Winsor & Newton silver ink. And I'm going to paint it on also with these little wavy, thin and thick stripes. The inspiration comes from the time that I've spent scuba diving and snorkeling. I love the underwater, how I feel when I'm there, the creatures and animals that I see, the light that comes down from the sun at the top. It inspires me and it makes me really feel relaxed. So that's the vibe I'm trying to go for here. I'm going back in and I'm adding some circles here, little bubbles with the colors from the Currents palette, same colors that will be listed below. You can try to follow along, but if you are painting this with me, yours will not look exactly like mine because the difference in the wetness of the color, the paint, the paper, how it bleeds, how it dries, yours will come out in your own way, and that's exactly what you want it to do. Don't be nervous that, oh, this doesn't look like hers. Just keep going. All those little cauliflower blooms that you see around on the page, those are from wet areas bleeding into other wet areas. Here I'm using a Posca white pen, a 0.7 millimeter. I'm just doodling on some round line shapes. I'll speed the video up here because this will get boring if you have to watch me put in all of these little dots. But the idea is to go around your paper, your painting, and just add doodles, whatever you feel, whatever comes out of you, put that on the paper, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Put that on the paper. More flora and fauna here. Sometimes I have to go over the line a few times. My Posca pen is a little old. It's not drawing as good as it could. But I'm I'm going to use it until it's completely bone dry. I'll let you watch along with what I'm doing, and I will put a comment in here and there when I add a new tool or color, or if I feel like I need to explain something, I'll come along and I'll tell you what I'm doing. This pen that I'm using is a Pentel Sparkle Pop, and I believe the color doesn't have a color, it's just the green. I have the link below. It's really shimmery. I don't know if you can see it. This Posca pen is really wearing out, so I go in and I use the Winsor & Newton white ink with a paintbrush. The paintbrush that I'm using is, I believe, A1. It'll be in the description below what exactly I'm using. It brightens up the color when I use the white ink. It's more opaque. I think I may just not use the Posca pens. The Posca pens are nice, especially if it's all dried out, like mine seems to be, to kind of give me an idea of where I want something to be, and then I'll go over it with the ink, the jarred ink. Just be careful when you continue drawing and painting that you don't put your hand on, like the side of your hand on the wet ink. It takes a little bit to dry. Just creating more flora. time I decided not to even use the Posca pen, and I just went right to the Winsor & Newton ink. We'll go back over these little floral leafy things I'm making with the second coat of the ink. Here I'm using a jelly roll, size 10. It's a white pen. using the Sparkle Green pop pen. Again, made little circles. And then back to the Jelly Roll 10 from Sakura. I drew a light circle in pencil so I could have like a start and end point, and that my circle would be pretty symmetrical. It can always be erased. I didn't erase it because after I finished I couldn't even see it, but it can always be erased later. Little dots inside the green to give it some dimension. Now I'm using the Pentel Sparkle Silver pen to make little bubbles in a line going across the page. Again, it's all intuitive. You can do things as you feel in your own painting. However your stripes turn out, however things blend together, go with what you see and how you feel. That's how you know it'll work out. Just go with the great things that are happening on your page. This Sparkle pen really is shimmery in real life. It catches the light nicely, gives it some added dimension and sparkle. Because I didn't put the silver bubbles on first, I'm not drawing over the white floral because I want it to look like it's behind them. Adding some green dots on the leaves, just to bring them out so you can see them better. Now here I'm adding like little dots down the page like bubbles. And then I decide, I think I want to put some green stripes inside the white. So I'm using a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen in May Green. It's size small, it's kind of fine tipped. I'll go down the page, and as I find white spots, I add them in. And then back to the white dots. Almost done. Feeling like this might be finishing it up. These kind of remind me when you're under the water and you see the bubbles going to the surface. That's kind of what inspired these little dots down the page. There's no right or wrong way to do this. This is all just intuitive. Didn't pre-plan this, didn't think about it. I just let each thing I do inform the next thing that I do. It's so freeing and relaxing to create this way. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a perfectionist or you're stressed with your art, or if you feel that you're in some kind of a creative slump. This technique, this using my sketchbook in this way, has really brought me out of a creative slump that I had been in for a long time. Not caring what the end product would be allows me to just play. And that is why I do it in the sketchbook, because the sketchbook doesn't matter. It's not a finished product to me. It's just where I doodle and where I enjoy myself. When I use a free page that's not in a sketchbook, I'm harder on myself. So the sketchbook is the way to go for me. Thanks so much for following along with me, and I hope this inspired you to grab some watercolors and a pen and see what magic happens for you. Have fun!